Welcome to another episode of Unstick Yourself. If you're listening to this show, then you've recently been through a very difficult breakup and you're finding yourself stuck, unable to move forward because these painful emotions keep dragging you back. But I want you to know you're not alone. In fact, I'm in the same place. And that's why I created this show, to help us all move forward together. Each week, I'll give you one or two ideas to try or to think about, and then we can begin a dialogue in the comments below, or you can email me at unstickyourself@yahoo.com. So if that sounds good, let's go ahead and get started. I'm recording today's episode on March 25th, which would have been my 19th wedding anniversary. What better time to do an episode about triggers? And what are triggers exactly? Triggers are those things we see or hear that remind us of our ex, and they trigger an emotion with us deep down in our gut, in that place where we're still trying to heal. And it can be a song, or it can be a restaurant where we used to eat, or a movie that we've seen together, or a park we used to walk to and have lunch. Whatever it is, when we experience it, it takes us back to a time with our ex, to a memory we've had with them. And it usually brings up a negative emotion with us in that moment. And that's why they're called triggers. I saw a car commercial the other day. It talked about two people moving in together, and it showed these two girlfriends packing up a car. It talked about what a big step it is and how you're going to have to learn about each other's idiosyncrasies. It talked about how this is a test, and it leads you to believe that this girl is getting ready to move in with her boyfriend. Then it shows the girl walking into the apartment, and the voiceover still talking about how this is a test. And as she walks in the door, she gets this disappointed look on her face. And the voiceover says, "And it's a test that Jeff just failed." They show a guy sitting in a chair with a virtual reality goggles on his face. He's playing video games, totally oblivious to anything that's going on around him. And she looks real disappointed. She unplugs a lamp and picks it up. That's the last thing in the apartment besides the chair that he's sitting in. And she just kind of shakes her head and walks out. So the big reveal, of course, is she's not moving in with her boyfriend. She's moving out because he spends too much time playing video games. And he removes the goggles. He's very shocked to see that the apartment around him is empty and his girlfriend is not around. And as the two girls drive off, they give each other a high five. And this is supposed to be a funny commercial, but let's unpack this a little bit and let's take a closer look at the message this is sending to society. This is a young couple that's in love and they're taking the next step. They're moving in together. It talks about having to learn each other's idiosyncrasies. We can assume that she's not familiar with his video game habit. That's not a part of his personality that she's had to encounter yet. And so what's the first thing she does when she sees an aspect of him that she doesn't like? What is her go-to move when she finds out about his video game habit? She packs up her shit and she moves out. And you can tell that he's surprised. He has no idea that she's upset because when he takes the goggles off, he's shocked. The place is empty and she's gone. So here's what her first action should have been. Here's the first thing she should have done. She should have talked to him. She should have set some boundaries. She should have indicated that the amount of time he was spending on his game was not okay. That would have been the responsible thing to do, and that should be a message that we're sending out to society. Instead, we see a man who's punched in the gut. She leaves without saying a word. He's up there with a broken heart. He's confused. He's dumbfounded. He doesn't know what's going on. And as the two girls drive away, they give each other a high five. That's the really disgusting part. And we wonder why the divorce rate is 50%. There are dumbass people sending this message out to our children and saying that this kind of behavior is okay, that this is how relationships work. This commercial was one of my triggers. She left him without saying a word about being unhappy. And that's what my wife did to me. She didn't say one word about being unhappy in our marriage. She just said, "I don't love you," and she moved out. So that's one of my triggers, but there are others. All the photos you see in my videos are photos that I've shot. Photography is a big-time hobby of mine. So one Saturday morning, I went up to Sugar Creek Metro Park, which is just south of Dayton. There's this cool path that has a tunnel of trees. There's these gnarled tree branches that hang over the path. It's about 50 yards long. So I went up there early Saturday morning. There's a little bit of fog in the air, a little bit of moss on the trees. The sun was just starting to come up and peek through the trees. And I got this great shot. If you're watching the video, it's on screen right now. And it was an awesome morning. I love getting to a place early and being the only one there to shoot photos. It's like my meditation. It's what drives me to wake up that early and go out. So this, for me, was a really great morning. That night, my wife told me she no longer loves me. And now, the only thing I see when I look at this photo is the day that my marriage died. So this image is a trigger for me. And there are tons of triggers for me. I live in our house, so there's about 100 triggers in every room. But this episode is how to cope with the triggers. How do we deal with them? How do we avoid them? So, first of all, know what your triggers are. Some things might hit you a little harder than others. Maybe for you it's a song. Maybe it's a restaurant where you proposed to her. Maybe it's a park where you walked hand in hand and had lunch. Maybe some things don't bother you as much. Maybe when you hear that song, it doesn't trigger you as much. But there are things that trigger you. So every time you get triggered, pay attention and make a note of it. And see if there's a pattern. See what triggers you more. See if it's something that can be avoided or that you can begin to predict. If it's a song, don't listen to the radio on your way to work. There's plenty of other things to listen to, podcasts, books on tape, or nothing. Have you ever listened to nothing on the way to work? It's pretty interesting. So look at your triggers and avoid what can be avoided. And in your house or in your apartment, remove those things around you that remind you of them. Everywhere there's a framed picture of you and him or you and her, replace it, put another picture in front of that one. Keep that one behind there because eventually it's not going to be a trigger, it's just going to be a memory. If she gave you a shirt, that shirt can go to Goodwill. If he gave you a stuffed bear that he wanted at the fair, that bear would probably look good in a child's room somewhere. Get rid of those things that are not essential that remind you of that person. Another great thing to do is stay present. Stay in the moment. I talked about this a little bit in episode 2, and I went over an exercise to help us. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to do so, but here's a quick recap. When you find yourself triggered and those painful emotions start to take over, catch yourself. Before it gets too bad, stop your mind from engaging in the past. Take a deep breath and be present for a moment, and then ask yourself this question. Am I okay right now, in this moment? The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. Am I okay right now? And unless you're currently being devoured by a great white shark in the ocean, the answer should be yes. Take heart in knowing that you are okay in this moment. And finally, remember how you react to something as a choice. Here's an illustration. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. You're already having a bad day, and so you get angry. You might even honk the horn. You might even let him know he's number one with that special hand gesture. Now imagine the feelings that go with that experience. The tightness in the chest, the shortness of breath. There's tons of harmful chemicals being released all throughout your body. It is not a good feeling. Now imagine a different scenario. Imagine you just got out of a meditation class and you're so relaxed that you've practically become one with the universe. And as you drive home, someone cuts you off. But your head is in such a good place, it doesn't bother you one bit. You even sort of wave him in, and you stay in that peaceful headspace. So even though it's the exact same experience, you're able to react to it in two completely different ways depending on where your head is. So it's all in how you look at the situation. When we look back on our breakup, we tend to see a very narrow-sighted view of the experience because of the pain we're feeling. Imagine you're standing on the ground and imagine that the breakup is a physical thing that you can see. It's about 50 feet away. Now, imagine you're wearing blinders so that all you see is a very narrow part of that experience. And now imagine that you float up above the situation. Now you can see the whole thing. You have a 360-degree view of the entire experience. You can see yourself standing on the ground with the blinders on. And you can see the amount of the situation you're focused on the ground compared to the whole. It's a very narrow sliver that you can see on the ground. Imagine standing on the ground, you take those blinders off, and you look at it from some different angles. Maybe you take a few steps to the right, and you begin to see this experience as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to meet someone who's better than the person you were with, someone who will treat you better. Or you go to the left and maybe you see an aspect of that relationship that you can be thankful for. For example, maybe you have kids and they're a blessing in your life. Maybe you can be thankful for that part of your relationship that brought this blessing into your life. It's a difficult thing to do, especially if you just broke up and that nerve is still very raw. But eventually you'll be able to walk around that whole experience, see every angle of it, and see the good and the bad. So that's it for today. As always, I'm going to leave you with a quote, and that quote is this: "It's not what happens to us. It's what we do when it happens to us." Thank you for joining me on my journey toward healing, and I'll talk to you next week on another episode of Unstick Yourself. Be well, my friends.